new energy had been unleashed. A spirit of reason and enlightenment that would give rise to the modern world. Many patrons would try to follow in their footsteps, but none would ever match the legacy of the Medici, godfathers of the Renaissance. To publicize his success, across the walls of the old government building, he ordered monumental frescoes from Vasari.
Vasari was a sculptor, Vasari was a painter, Vasari was an architect, but more than all of these three arts combined, he supervised everything that was produced in the arts in function of the Medici ideology. Vasari was coordinating more than just producing art at the time. And it is probably one of the first time in Western history in which we have a systematic form of propaganda, of a regime that is in need of legitimizing itself and producing a state ideology that is not existing.
Cosimo carefully crafted his image, shaping and editing Vasari's creations. Even the ceilings were bursting with heroic display. And Cosimo made sure that every generation of his family were given their place, turning the headquarters of the old republic into a temple to the Medici Dynasty. It was fit for a king, if not for the new Duchess, Eleonora.
When she arrived in Florence, she was quite disappointed because Naples was the largest city of Europe with roughly 300,000 inhabitants. Florence, compared to that, had probably less than 60,000 inhabitants, had been a republic, and she found, for instance, her side of the Palazzo Vecchio as being way too modest for her dignity, contradicting all of the traditions of the time. She purchased with her private money Palazzo Pitti, claiming that she could not raise her children of royal blood in such a humble residence.
Eleonora had bought a fortress for her family. It was a shrewd move, because the couple's regal ambitions had fueled the envy of their rivals. Now, those rivals wanted the Medici family dead. A network of secret police kept the suspicious Duke well informed.
Cosimo was always capable of dealing with this risk in a prudent and clever way. We know that he was paying roughly 300 bodyguards regularly, so that is a good way to, cope with that.
Such security measures impressed Cosimo's guests.
When he goes through the city, his wife and children accompany him, but with a guard of Germans, a light cavalry, and at least 100 musketeers.
The Duke's enemies were not easily deterred. Cosimo was ruthless in revenge. He had to protect the family, to whom he was deeply devoted.
Since he became prince, there is no hint that he has had anything to do with anyone but the Duchess, his wife. He lives as an outstanding family man, eating always with his wife and children at a moderately plain table.
Now Cosimo went everywhere with knives down his boots and body armor underneath his clothes. and his safe passage through the city was secured by building an enclosed, private corridor above the streets. But Cosimo had a problem. He was master of a complex administration, managed by myriad offices scattered throughout the city. For a cautious man like Cosimo, this was far too risky.
He remembers everyone by name, and if he sees a stranger, he wants to know who he is and what he does. For although he has memoranda concerning income, expenses, troops, he remembers it all.
It was Cosimo's realization that you couldn't run the government without a permanent bureaucracy. And if he was going to organize the government in this systematic way, then they had to have a location.
Such a location had to be safe, and naturally, it had to be grand. The new buildings were constructed along two sides of a street, with a corridor linking the two wings. They were known only by the Italian word for offices, uffizi.
The original purpose of that palace was to house the government administration of Florence, which was getting bigger at that point. The Medici realized that if they wanted to run a large, modern state, they needed to have a systematic and very organized civil service government agencies.
From this well-protected base, Cosimo secured his own preeminence in Tuscany. Once again, Vasari covered the ceilings with jubilant frescoes.
Vasari's main trade was that he was a great impresario. I mean, he was a decent painter, but, it wasn't great. But he was a great manager. He lines up the painters, the sculptors, the architects, the masons.
Finally, Cosimo felt secure.
I am a ruler who accepts the authority of no one apart from God.
And with Vasari's help, Cosimo founded a new school of art and design so that ambitious young artists would come to study in Florence. But there was one man who would never grace the school with his presence. And who had been discovered, nurtured, and bullied by the Medici, had finally had enough.
There was a tremendous source of frustration to Cosimo that Michelangelo wouldn't have anything to do with him and remained in Rome for the last 30 years of his life in high moral dudgeon about what the family had done by taking over absolute control of the Republic. And he refused to go back.
Michelangelo was angry, bitter, and tired. Now, he began work on his final sculpture, La Pietà. Upon its completion, he vented a lifetime of fury and frustration on the arm of Christ, attempting to smash it with a hammer. Michelangelo's own tortured likeness, frozen forever in the face of Nicodemus. Only death could reconcile Michelangelo with the Medici.
When Michelangelo died in 1564, the Florentine government arranged secretly to sneak the body out of Rome, hidden inside of a hay basket, and bring it back to Florence, where they staged this enormous ceremonial funeral for him. They co-opted him after his death and made him into the greatest of Florentine artists, even though for 30 years he'd been thumbing his nose at the Medici.